Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. My name is Kaylee and today we are back on my island Rubble for another speed build video. Today we'll be building an infected mushroom forest inspired by the game and the new show The Last of Us. And I'm currently obsessed with this show right now, so I'm super excited for this build. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to one of our friends, Toad's World, for recommending this build in the comments. This was such a fun idea, so always feel free to leave your ideas in the comments as it may become a build on my channel one day. Also, before we get started, here are a few pictures I'm using for inspiration for this build and the general vibe of this area. But like I said, I'm super excited for this build, so let's jump right into it. So this area is going to work as a larger transition area between the plaza and the build I have planned for the area closer to the cliff in the back of my island. So I'm going to make this path go up and slightly to the right to lead to this new area. And I know some people struggle with transition areas between builds, and I think my biggest piece of advice is to think of it as a mini build of its own. Because sure, you can throw down a few pieces to fill the space, but if you go into the build thinking of it as a standalone piece of your island, I think it comes out better. So just like my train track video, in this video, I'm giving this whole transition area its own build and unique idea. But right now I'm laying down the beginning of our pathway and carving that out with some stunted trees. Like in all my more natural builds, I'm going to be using the smaller trees close to the path and then slowly adding in our larger items and trees the farther out from the path we get. And I'm going to try to keep this area pretty natural and neutral, so mainly using the mush items, the vine items, a few rocks and decayed trees, and keeping them all to browns, blacks, and grays. On this island I do incorporate yellows and greens, but for this area I wanted to keep it more muted because in my mind it looks a little creepier with the darker colors rather than having a bunch of pops of colors. Like I said, I will be adding in some mush and vine items. If you haven't seen The Last of Us the game or the show, it's a world where a brain-controlling fungus causes a global pandemic, and basically the fungus turns the hosts into a crazy fast and scary zombie. So since that's all about a mutant fungus, I think the mushroom forest really fits this idea, and I'm so glad that Nintendo gave us these darker and creepy looking mush and vine items, because it really works for this build. I also think that the vine items work because it's explained that the zombies that are taken over by the fungus can communicate miles away from each other with these long vine-like root structures. And I found this amazing tree root code that I think looks like these vine-like structures in the show, so I'll be using that code under all the mush parasols and the giant vine items to make it look like the fungus is rooting into the ground so that they can communicate with the other mushroom items. I also decided to bring this build slightly out to the left and behind the resident services building because this section was looking a little bare. But I won't extend it too far back since I do have plans for this area behind resident services and all the way up to the cliff. And here I am using the root code to go underneath a giant vine. I did use a majority of the tiles for this code, but I left off the very edge pieces because I wanted to make sure there was enough room to add more trees and shrubs so that this area looked a little bit more dense and lush. I also decided to add some fencing right behind the resident services to block off this area because I want there to only be 2 ways to get in and out of the plaza, so blocking off this area prevents any visitors from going off path and getting lost or missing some of the island. and I just think that the barbed wire fencing makes this area look a little creepy and dangerous. I'm also adding some trees and larger items to the front of this build that backs up to our abandoned fishing hut. So I'm periodically running to the side of the fishing hut to make sure I like how these items look from this angle as well. Which I think is another good tip for transition areas. You kind of want to marry the bigger build to the transition area, so you should almost not even see the line between the build and the transition area because they flow so well together. And since the path is a little further to the left, a lot of the section on the right, close to the beach, you won't really be able to see, so I'm just going in and layering different trees and throwing in a few decayed trees, giant vines, and mush parasols. But since it won't be seen, you don't really need to add so many small details, plus having some free space will help with island lag, which thankfully I haven't experienced on this island yet, but I know it will come eventually. Now I'm starting to go in and add a few of our filler codes in a straight line across the build. This is where our build will finish, and I'm adding these codes to go under a line of barbed wire fencing. I think adding codes under fencing in basically all of the items I place gives the build more dimension and keeps the area from looking too bare. Now I'm going into this small area to add some bushes to block this section off, and I'm also adding in some glowing moss and custom codes just to fill up the space. You can probably tell, but I like to run through my build while I'm decorating. It helps me find any spots that may look a little empty, or sometimes I like to move items slightly over to get a better view of them. But I think checking the view of the build every once in a while helps me make sure I like how it's coming along, before I get too far into the build to realize that I don't like something. Also, I love these mush lamps, but I wish our villagers couldn't touch them because Rubble here kept turning them on, and I really don't want a bright green mushroom in the middle of my build. Since this build is inspired by The Last of Us, do you think you would survive an apocalypse? Personally, I think I stand no chance. Especially with how fast the infected move and attack in this series, I would definitely have not made it past the first few days of the outbreak. I think I might stand a better chance in an apocalypse like The Walking Dead, since the zombies are relatively slow, but anything running at me, absolutely not. I'm pretty short and have short legs, so there is no way I could outrun basically anyone. But to finish off this build, I'm going in on the right side and behind the resident service building, just to densen up the area with some larger trees. And here's our finished build. But that's the end of the video. Thanks so much for watching. Before you leave, make sure to give the video a like, comment, and to subscribe to the channel. If you watched to the end, let me know if you would take the chances of walking through an infected mushroom forest in real life. Bye, friends!